We are a little over 2 weeks away from the premiere of the Supergirl movie, but did you know that it's not the first Supergirl movie or even the first movie to just be called Supergirl? Well, considering this is the age of the internet where algorithms rule us all, I'm pretty sure you probably did. But regardless, 1984's Supergirl is a movie I've meant to weigh in on for quite a while because it is such an interesting oddity in both her history and the history of superhero movies in general. The movie was made primarily as a British production and set in the same universe led by Christopher Reeve's Superman. From what I've gathered, it was meant as an attempt to develop the series into more of a franchise, with potential for sequels to this movie and more solo outings for other super characters and possibly even more of the DC Universe. The entire production was also literally made pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, so they only had the original version of the character to draw on, as well as Reeves' adaptation, which led to some odd results. The plot of the movie basically goes that Kara Zor-El is living in Argo City, a sort of Krypton refugee pocket dimension in inner space, where she's learning from a scientist and artisan named Zoltar, and one day while messing around with his tools, she loses the Power Stone's containment orb and it gets sucked out into space. Okay, it's not literally the Power Stone's containment orb from the MCU, but it looks exactly like that prop, and the name is an equally dumb classic sci-fi sounding thing, the Omega Hedron, so forgive me if I just refer to it as the orb for the rest of this video. Anyway, this is really bad because that orb powered their whole city, and now without it, they only have a little while before everything stops working and they all die. Luckily, Zoltar was also talking about how he was about to leave in a space pod like 5 minutes before that happened, so Kara hijacks the thing and follows the orb to Earth. But when she gets there, she's too busy experimenting with her newfound powers and taking in the planet's beauty to notice a literal witch and her boyfriend find the orb and take it home. Shortly thereafter, Kara stumbles upon an all-girls boarding school and decides to become a student because it looks fun, I guess. From there, the movie just kind of becomes a long string of comedic scenes of Kara trying to get used to Earth life and the Witch Lady, whose name I've only just now thought to mention is Selena because she isn't based on any DC character I could find and is incredibly dull to watch besides that, trying to figure out how to use the orb's powers until the two eventually begin clashing when Selena tries to use her powers to kidnap and force a love potion on the school's groundskeeper, and it backfires as Supergirl saves him just after taking the potion, so he falls in love with her instead, and Selena sends her to the Phantom Zone. There she meets up with Zoltar, who I assume was sent to the zone on charges of child endangerment, and he tells her there is only one very dangerous way out, and they both have to brave it together for her to get back to Earth. Which they do, but only Kara makes it, and finds that Selena has now taken over the entire town, so she fights a bunch of poorly aged special effects to save the friends she's made, knocks Selena into a swirling vortex of power, gets the orb back, and flies off into the end credits. So, yeah, this movie is pretty wild and all over the place, to the point where a lot of people who talk about it don't even seem to know what to make of it, except that it's not as good as Superman the movie. And while I definitely agree with that assessment, I think there's a lot more going on than just that. The filmmakers are clearly trying to recapture the magic of Reeves' early films, with the Crystal Space Commune look of that Krypton now squeezed into the much smaller Argo City, rather than having it be the asteroid-sized chunk of Flash Gordon Future City it originally was in the comics, and cutting a lot of the horror of Kara's origin in favor of showing her as a more innocent and wondrous person, so that when she gets to Earth, they can have the extended power showcase sequence that's somewhat remnant of the date scene from Superman the movie. They also give her this fish out of water reaction to everything at the school, which in turn gives the feeling that they're going for something more like Supergirl's early comic stories, where she was essentially a big sister and guardian angel to the children at the Midvale orphanage. But a lot of the comedy they try to do, while also building a friendship between her and Lucy Lane, feels unintentionally dry and even a little robotic. Like, oh, the movie's a school comedy for the next few scenes, so I guess we gotta show these things happening now. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that they try to have an in the moment explanation for Kara's secret identity name, Linda Lee, which she just picks at random in the comics, by having her spot a poster of Robert E. Lee in the background behind the principal while registering, which is just an insane choice no matter what era you're making this movie in. I'm sorry. I mean, if you absolutely felt like you had to have her get it from somewhere, were there no posters of Bruce Lee available in the UK in the 80s? Maureen Teffey as Lucy Lane is honestly the only enjoyable part of this portion of the movie for me. She really gets across Lucy's persona as the rebellious but still boy-crazy tomboy that wants to be a friend to Linda and get her out of her shell. It's just a shame that her character isn't a bigger part of the plot or Kara's character arc. Kara herself is a fine portrayal by Helen Slater, but you get the impression that Slater was often told to play for much younger than the age she actually was at the time of filming, as she's often surrounded by actresses younger than her and giving this doe-eyed look of wonder at everything when in Kara or Linda mode, and it's only during the third act where she fully embraces her role as Supergirl that she feels like she has a sense of agency or command over the situation. I do love this costume though. It's just classic reds and blues with the only minor unique touch being a gold inner lining to the skirt that you can only see briefly in a couple of shots. It looks exactly like it was made for her to stand shoulder to shoulder with Reeves' Superman. Just a real shame that they didn't bother to explain how she got it in the movie, and we never actually saw them together until Andy Muschietti went power mad with CGI, because, yeah, though this is set in the same universe as Reeves' version, Reeve himself elected not to appear in the movie early on in production, so to compensate, we get a radio broadcast explaining that he's off-world during the early bits, Kara reminding everyone that he's her cousin, something like 26 times across the course of the movie, and a minor appearance by Jack Larson as someone named Jimmy Olsen, who looks like Jimmy Olsen but doesn't act like any Jimmy Olsen I ever saw. Get this, he literally shows up, eats some Popeye's chicken, calls a guy wandering in the street a crackhead, tries to get with an underage girl, and then spends the rest of the movie trying to stop said underage girl from opposing the villain because it's dangerous. Great pal you got there, Superman. Speaking of the villain, Selina is maybe the most frustrating thing about this movie for me because she's just a bundle of missed opportunities, to the point where I actually procrastinated on writing this portion of the video by going to the bathroom and then writing a whole new section for last week's video first. She managed to find the orb before Kara, but Kara doesn't even seem to care or realize it until they actively start fighting, which makes the two feel so disconnected as protagonist and antagonist when you could have easily had Kara track the orb to Selina's hideout and then get tricked by her somehow to illustrate how she has to shake off her naivete to survive on Earth. I'd have much preferred that over the scene where she almost gets raped by two truckers and the whole thing is played for laughs. Seriously, That's a real thing that happens. Selena's motives themselves also just make very little sense. We're told that she wants to rule the world and that she used to be a two-bit fortune teller before one of Linda's teachers became her sugar daddy, but we never really get a sense of why she does, other than she'll be able to own all the gaudy bullshit she wants, and landscapers the world over will line up to be her sex slaves. Really just feels like they were trying to copy Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, but a woman, without any kind of forethought into how to build a villain like that for Supergirl. They just gender swapped everything about him in the most stereotypical ways possible. Instead of the vain, middle-aged mad scientist with designs on getting rich through manipulating the market via terrorist actions, while also living in a vast underground cavern with two assistants who are afraid of him, it's a Wiccan who wants to rule the world through powers beyond her comprehension while living in an abandoned amusement park with two assistants who adore her until it all starts getting out of control. And I know a lot of people love Faye Dunaway. She's a very talented and iconic actress, but she really feels like she's half-assing it in this movie to me. A lot of her early scenes with Peter Cook, who does seem like he's trying to do something with what little he's given, are just so dull. I wouldn't even second screen that shit unless I had some kind of booze in me. Plus, the ultimate nitpicking nerd nail in the coffin here, but this movie is about a super character taking on a magic-based villain, and it's never brought up that Kryptonians are weak to magic. The effects for the movie aren't bad for the time, though. Sure, a lot of them have aged poorly, and they're not as impressive as the ones in Superman the movie or Superman 2, but for the time, at only 70% of the budget, you could do a lot worse. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the score. I usually like Jerry Goldsmith's stuff fine, but here he really misses the mark, with a lot of really generic sounding fluff, and a main theme that seems to be trying to be big and epic like Williams' Superman theme, while also having a lighter touch, but it's ruined by this high-pitched whining noise that just repeats over and over again like a broken doorbell. I would probably have it in my walking playlist were it not for that fucking noise. However, that's the least of this film's troubles. This movie didn't even come close to making its budget back, and because of that, the rights to the Superman film franchise were sold to Canon, and Superman 4, The Quest for Peace was made, leaving this movie largely forgotten by all but the most desperate bad movie review channels and superfans of the character like myself. From there, Kara herself went on to die the following year in DC's 50th anniversary comic, go unadapted again until the DCAU, and off the big screen until her cameo at the end of Superman open bracket 2025 close bracket. Unless you count CGI, which I don't. So is this movie really that terrible? Did it completely let the character down? Nah, there's worse. Worst takes on Supergirl, worst superhero movies, worst movies in this very series. Personally, I can see what they were going for, and I think with a few more drafts, you may have been able to get the blend of styles that they had here to work. But that's not how it went, and as such, we're left with a film that I don't outright hate, but I do have a somewhat of a dislike for, both because of its villain and the fact that it started the trend of live-action Supergirls that drift more and more away from what I like about the character. Until the thing I'm going to talk to you about next week.